Hey guys, what's up? Jake here. Today we are reviewing a action camera that came out about 2 years ago now. It is the Sony x3000 and I bought this camera I think just a little over a year ago. It was about a year old then. There was a lot of hype basically comparing it between the GoPro Hero 5 and it is still to this day even held up against something like the GoPro Hero 6. So basically, I want to put this thing through the ropes and then I'm going to tell you guys the top 5 things I like about this camera, the top 5 things I dislike about this camera, and then I'm going to explain basically whether I would recommend or not recommend this camera. And I'm going to do a definitive answer. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, depending on this, depending on that. If you're here watching this video, I kind of get basically an impression of what type of person would be looking for this because that's exactly why I bought it and why I decided to buy this camera. So I'll give you my likes and my dislikes, and then I'll tell you whether or not I would buy it. Obviously, I did buy it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I would buy it again. So we'll do that at the end. Obviously, this is shot on the Panasonic G9 right now, my main camera, but the rest of today's video I'm gonna vlog on this, so you can get basically a sample of the footage. The vlog probably won't be super exciting. Carly and I are just gonna go downtown, get some food, go to a movie. Nothing too crazy, but just a bunch of examples with this camera and the footage. And then at the very end, we'll come back to the office. I'll get on this camera again. I'll let you guys know once it's switched over. It should be pretty obvious. And then we will talk about this camera and actually why I'm potentially considering to start using it again, mostly after the results of last video. So we'll talk about that when we get back. But anyway, enjoy today's vlog, get a sample of the footage. You know, we're not jumping out of planes or doing anything cool with the action camera, but it should just give you an idea of some of the strengths of this camera. I'll try and highlight them and we'll go from there. So anyway, see you guys back here when we get back and see you in the vlog today. Peace.
Remember when you told me you believe in something and you said.
Alright guys, so we are heading to the thrift store, the movie theater, and downtown to get some food later. We're just testing out this camera today. I've used this a lot, but I just wanted to do a whole video with giving you guys just some sample footage. This camera has the ability to actually plug in a 3.5mm headphone jack, so you can use something like the Rode video mic, which I use with the G9. But to just completely test this camera, we're using the actual in-house microphone just to see how it turns out. I've used it in the past, it's pretty good, but we'll confirm it today. But anyway, we're headed to the thrift shop, and we'll see you guys when we get there. Alright, we made it out of the thrift store. Where are we going now? We're headed downtown to get some food. Oh, we're gonna get poke. Poke's delicious. We'll see you there.
Summer's end and you feel that this is your beginning. Will colors fade, but it's okay. There's good in changes. Go run away, get it out of your system.
We ate some food, got all fed up, and now we're gonna head to the Capitol building to shoot a little more footage with the camera.
And come back when you're older. Go catch the storm within your broken bones and be wild, 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 wild.
Alright guys, so you've seen the footage. Pretty impressive for a camera that I literally put in my pocket all of the time. It fits everywhere, it's tiny, the sensor is tiny. I mean, if you look at this thing, it's just itty bitty. It's a great little camera. It has really good image quality. Again, can shoot 4K. So let's talk about it. Again, Jake Filzine review, 5 likes, 5 dislikes. So we're starting out with the number 5 dislike in my opinion. So my first dislike number 5, is that it isn't waterproof. Now, I know what you guys are saying. Well, Jake, I've done the research. This comes with a waterproof case. Yes, it does, which is where my beef comes in. So while I love the case because it can actually dive further down, feels like it's not going to get wet, the case is super robust. Love the case. The microphone in the front and the microphone jack in the back, which is one of the coolest features of this camera, becomes obsolete. So if you wanted to do like jumping into the water or something like that, you pretty much no longer have audio with this camera. And it's kind of a hassle that you have to think about it. It's just not the most ergonomic, fluid process. So that's dislike number 5. Not a deal breaker. Again, I'm kind of pulling at straws with this camera because, as you'll probably realize, I love this thing, but I've got to give you 5 likes, 5 dislikes. Okay, so now reason number 5 as to why to like this camera is that microphone and that microphone jack. And then also it has an actual jack in the back in which you can plug like a Rode video mic, which I'm using on the G9 right now. That really just means you can have super good audio in an action camera. That's number 5 like, super awesome features. All right, so now for number 4 dislike, the shape of the camera is a dislike for me. I really like the GoPro shape. I like that basically the GoPro is flat, fits in a lot of places a lot better, just seems to make a lot more sense. This, if you do it on like a head mount, you basically suddenly adopt a unicorn horn. If you put it on your chest, the chest mount I like a lot, you basically have a protrusion, Iron Man style on steroids out of your chest. The shape is not the best, but again, it's not a deal breaker, and it feels almost like an old school camcorder, which has some advantages. So while it's kind of a dislike, it's not a deal breaker again. All right, so now for number 4 like, it's the actual image quality that you can get out of this thing. Now again, it pales in comparison to something like the G9, which I love, probably my favorite camera I've ever used, but this camera is not bad for the size, the sensor, the ease of use. It could shoot 4K 30, it could shoot 120 frames per second at 100 megabits per second, which is a ton of data that this camera is pushing through, so it really just makes that image quality better. Again, on YouTube, this thing doesn't look as good because I talked about this in another video. Basically, because of the aperture, there's no bokeh with this thing, and so you know, that's something to consider. It doesn't really look as cinematic as that full frame DSLR or, you know, fast aperture Micro Four Thirds type look, that bigger body camera. It's hard to get that with this, but overall, for the size of the camera and what you're using, the image quality is awesome. Okay, so on that vein, dislike number 3 is the kind of struggle with this camera to get those cinematic results because the sensor is so small, the aperture is just like really high numerically, which means that it's super small. It's not letting in a ton of light. This camera struggles to get that cool cinematic look, that bokeh, which I love with my fast prime lenses with the G9. You can get really cool bokeh, you know, better looking slow motion, better looking, flatter results. This is a little bit wide. It's that GoPro type look. So while this has a lot of pros and is a great vlogging camera, it's a great action camera for sports, it doesn't quite fit the bill in terms of getting those cinematic type looks. Okay, so for like number 3 is ease of use. This camera is incredibly easy to use. Action cameras usually are, but this one in particular, you hit the power button, you hit the record button. I mean, it's just as easy as that. It's quick to fire up, it's quick to get footage. Today I was kind of out shooting with it. Some of that footage probably made it into the B-roll sequence for showing you guys some of the test footage, but it's just so easy to just hit record, put it where you want it. You can get, you know, some interesting angles with this. You can put it mounted in different places. You know, there's so many things you can do with this camera that are really hard to do with the G9 or impossible. I'm not gonna like duct tape the DSLR basically to my head. So, you know, something to consider, but this camera is super easy to use and I love it for that reason. All right, and on to dislike number 2, and that is the menu system. It's this little LCD screen on the side. It's not the best. Now, compared to kind of what I was expecting with a Sony menu system, little LCD side screen, yeah, it's better than I expected, I'll give you that. But just in terms of, you know, going in, adjusting your settings, trying to kind of see what you're doing, the fact that you don't have a screen to maybe see what's changing, it's not the greatest. So the menu system is my dislike number 2. All right, so now for like number 2, the battery life in this thing is unbelievable. I go out, Shot all day pretty much with this thing, 4K 30 frames per second, which is basically pushing the power of this camera, and then 180p 120 frames per second, 100 megabits per second, pushing tons of data through this camera. And I don't even think I took a bar off of the battery. Because it doesn't have a screen, I think this camera saves a ton on battery. And so I bought like 2 backup batteries for this camera, and I've never used them. I've never even charged them, because the first couple times I went out with this thing, charged it, I shot all day, no problem. And so it really just doesn't make sense to have those backups. You're gonna basically be able to shoot all day. So that is my reason number 2, like. Now, for my number 1 dislike with this camera, it's kind of contradictory to the last statement, which was how good the battery life is. I wish this had a screen. So for a long time, I've kind of been considering maybe even buying a GoPro over this camera. I chose this camera over GoPros just because of what I read. It was a little bit cheaper, and people seem to like the image quality better. Shoots really flat. I forgot to mention that in the image portion of this video. The image quality, not only is it good, but the colors are really flat, which means when you go into post, you can drag those colors up. You can take certain chunks of the image, color them up nice and good, and that makes a huge difference with a camera like this. GoPros have kind of struggled with that. It has its problems from what I've heard. Alright guys, and so now for reason number 1 why I love this camera, and it's a complete no-brainer. This camera has some of the best stabilization I have ever seen in really any camera. The G9 paired with an optically stabilized lens, I think rivals this, possibly. It's a little harder to tell because the G9 is so much bigger, there's so much more camera shake, kind of, I don't know, it's tough to say, but this camera's stabilization, it's optical stabilization. There's no digital or electronic stabilization going on in camera. You have to do that all in post, but just straight out of the camera, optical stabilization, which means moving parts on the lens. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. The stabilization in this camera is the huge seller. I've not been able to compare it to a GoPro, but basically just from what I've watched, what I've reviewed, what I've seen, this camera that's number 1 selling point for me. Alright guys, so we've done the 5 dislikes, we've done the 5 likes. What would I recommend? Would I recommend to buy this camera? Now, if I'm not mistaken, I'm imagining that the people who are watching this video were people like me who wanted something small, who are maybe looking for an action camera, good quality image, be able to be mounted in a lot of places, good battery life. You know, maybe they're looking at GoPros, maybe they're looking for a different product besides GoPro that is maybe a little bit better. I don't know that for a fact because I haven't used a GoPro. I'd love to get my hands on one and review one, but as far as I'm concerned, based on what I believe you are as a user trying to get information from someone who has used this camera a lot, I would absolutely recommend this camera. Now, if you're wanting a more cinematic camera and you just can't afford one yet and you're wanting something as a stepping stone, I would say wait. Get something maybe more like the G7, about the same price, maybe even a little bit cheaper these days because that's an old camera as well, and get those prime lenses that I've talked about in other videos. I'm going to do some reviews on those. Get that bokeh look and you can basically get a more cinematic result. If you want an action camera and this is something that you've considered and you came here, 100% I recommend this camera. Totally go and buy it. It's worth your money. I've used it for basically a year now. Don't regret it for a second. It was like all I used on my Hawaii trip. There's 3 videos back on my channel where I used it and basically thought I was going to use the G7 with some better lenses and ended up just shooting with the Sony Pro, as I like to call it, all trip long. So basically, absolutely, I would recommend to buy it. It's a great camera. It's super flexible in what it can do. It won't let you down. The Sony x3000 is a beast. It's here to stay. Anyway, guys, that's all from me. If you're new to this channel, you know, hit that like button, maybe subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. I shoot a lot of stock footage. I'm going to start doing some reviews because I've started to acquire some more hardware that I've been using for, you know, a couple years now, year, and I want to start talking about it, recommending stuff to you guys. And then I also like to vlog on how I take my pictures, how I take my videos. So anyway, subscribe if you want to see more of that, and I will see you guys in the next one. That's all from me, Jake here. Peace out. See you guys.